From WTDG Toledo, Bridges, with your host, Donnie Miller, connecting our community with information about issues and opportunities.
Hi there. Welcome to Bridges. I'm so glad to be back with you. We've been away during this election season, but we're back in full force today, and we are talking about, like everybody else in the country is talking about, and will be talking about for the next several weeks, the outcome of this election. It has been an interminable season, and I think everyone will agree with that. But it is over. We have a winner. That winner is Barack Hussein Obama. He has been, as you all know as well, he has been elected again as the president of these great United States of America. And we're going to talk about that this morning. And I've got fabulous people. I'm so excited about this panel this morning. We've got Mark Wagner. I've been chasing Mark Wagner around for like 5 years trying to get him on this show. And I'm so happy he's here. I'm so happy you're here. He's the Republican state senator for District 2. Really glad to have you. We've got Tron Cunningham, an up and coming voice in local politics. Ground game, great ground game. You were out there, feet on the ground during this election, working with the folks. That'll be a great perspective to have. And everybody knows my buddy Peter Yavagi. Tremendous Democratic operative, been around for a lot of years, long time. You're like really old, Peter, but you wear it well. It's great.
Now, started
young. Lucas County Administrator, thanks for being here this morning. Anybody surprised?
I was a little surprised.
Were you?
Yesterday, going into the election, I really thought it was going to be closer than what it was. And if you looked at, first of all, congratulations to President Obama, another 4 years. But if you look at the battleground states, there's really 7 big battleground states. Sure. And President Obama ran the table on the battleground states. So I was a little surprised by that.
I was surprised. Here in Ohio, it was nail-biting down to each vote. Every vote counted. I didn't know what Ohio was going to do because of the looking at 2010 election and our strong Republican get out the vote efforts there. I wanted to have a ground game that would help to match and make sure that Ohio did deliver, and that grassroots effort was a big part of the surprise that I saw here in Ohio.
I was surprised by how close it was in Ohio. Though.
Exactly. You didn't know. You didn't know.
Well, I will tell you, I think the reality is there's a certain amount of calmness that I saw throughout the campaign that surprised me. And that was because I think that the Obama campaign's ability to target, to micro-target, to set goals, and to be able to deliver on them was something that we've never seen before. Yes. Did I expect him to run the table? No. Yeah. I was feeling increasingly confident about Ohio, but you know how this is. The closer you get to the election, the more uncertain you are. Right. Yeah. And I think an important part of all of this was a mandate through the Electoral College, which has always been a big debate about popular vote versus electoral college. Sure. Because I think the next 4 years are going to be extremely critical in how we're going to lead. My biggest concern, very honestly, is that when you look at both the congressional races and the Senate races, there's the potential for a much greater divide. Right. And how do you bring people to the table? It's one of the realities of the legislature in Ohio. Mark and I are on different sides of the aisle in terms of political philosophy, but we were really able to work together. We didn't always agree. Right. There were some things that had to be worked through, and without that, these next 2 years are going to be very, very challenging, I think, for government.
Yeah, I agree, though. I actually think that one of the mandates of this presidency has to be the recognition that this country is so divided. And Obama has got to be, as I heard many people say Tuesday night, he's got to become that president that he promised us he would be 4 years ago. He's got to be the one that brings this country together, that works across the aisle. People, I can tell you, I think that while there was lots of enthusiasm about this election, people were mortified by the level of meanness in the discourse, and just the rancor between the parties.
And what was really surprising too, Donnie, was if you looked at all the polls on the approval rating on Congress over the last 2 years, it's down at 13%. The president's approval was down for a while. And what's also remarkable is how little changed, too. We still have the same president, a Democrat. We have the Senate controlled by Democrats, and we have the House controlled by Republicans. And I do think there is a message being sent that people want things done. And even though we have this partisan divide, we spent a lot of time yelling at each other for the last year and a half. It's time to start working together. And I think two things were pretty telling last night. First of all, Mitt Romney, I thought in a very classy move, broadcasts President Obama's victory speech. I thought that was great. And John Boehner had some conciliatory remarks and really opened the door to sitting down and talking to the president, because we now, we've gone through some unsettled times. We really have. And we know who's going to be in the White House for the next 4 years. We know what Congress is going to look like in the next 2 years, and we know what the Senate's going to look like for the next 2 years. That's a long period of time. We've got some big challenges ahead of us, and I hope people start working together.
I think everybody has to take a step back, take a deep breath, and realize how many of the critical issues for our community and our country have been delayed, that simply need to be addressed, and they can't be put off anymore. On a longer term issue, I have to tell you, and this has been a concern of mine for a very, very long time, issue 2 was defeated, not by much, 52-47, I believe. And issue 2 in this particular instance, although that number is not too good in political circles these days, was the question of how districts are drawn.
Right.
And as long as we're in a situation where you don't have competitive districts, where the battle is around ideas, as long as we don't have that, it's going to continue to be very, very hard to govern effectively. I've said for a very long time, I don't mind. I don't want to run in a safe district if I'm running for office. I want to run in a competitive district. And what we've done, I call it political apartheid. Okay, that you've got districts that are overwhelmingly Republican. You got districts that are overwhelmingly Democrat. And of course, now with technology, you can carve that from between the garage and between the back pool, for God's sakes. Okay. Yeah. For one, I think that as a state, that issue has to be revisited for the future, for the opportunity to be able to have the kind of dialogue I think that Mark is talking about.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And exactly, with the divisiveness that of the redistricting has brought about here, and the felling of issue 2, we're looking at consensus builders in our government. We are same, I think, mandate that we're giving to President Barack Obama is to be a consensus builder and allow consensus building to happen in our government, to work with the Republican-controlled Congress, Republican-controlled Congress, and the Democrats that have the majority in the Senate. We're looking for consensus building leadership at the national and at the local level.
Peter,
do you think there are people both at the national level and here in Ohio on both sides of the aisle who are willing to do that?
I think there are, but I do think...
Did they survive?
Well, that's another issue.
Based on your district.
I do think, and I've been a long supporter of redistricting reform as well. I think issue 2 was not the best way to go about it. I think that the procedure was a flawed way. And I think you need to have bipartisan redistricting reform, where you stop drawing these districts simply for a partisan advantage.
And we've all both done it.
Yes.
Okay? Let's face it.
But
okay?
I think it does, when you have competitive districts, really sort of drive consensus. I do think the personalities are down there to do it. But they have to have the support at home in order to do it too. That we have to recognize that sometimes when you cross a party line, it's not always a bad thing.
Right.
Sure.
And we have often had sort of purity tests in both parties. You got to believe these 10 things to be a Republican. You've got to believe these 10 things to be a Democrat. And if you ever violate any of those, you're no longer considered part of that party.
I think the Democrats are a little more loose on that than the Republicans.
Well, Peter, we can go through some issues, and I think there's some issues that you'd be very hard pressed to find a Democrat to challenge some of these issues.
Let me redirect this just a little bit, because you guys are going to fight, and I don't really want that.
I don't
want that. This is a friendly show. This is a friendly show.
Donnie, not at all. And that I think is an important part. And
Well,
when
you
you
know
asked
what,
me to come on board and you said that that Mark was going to be here, Absolutely.
And Dottie, Peter is a great friend of mine. Peter and I have had these conversations a million times, and that's part of democracy.
Yeah.
Well, I totally agree. And before we break into a course of kumbaya, let me ask this next question.
From one to the other. Yes, ma'am.
I think that one of the things that Mark and I talked about just a little bit, but what he said struck me, and that was public service needs to be about the public. And I think that before we can do any of this talk about consensus building and working across the aisle, I think every elected official needs to be challenged to step back and recommit themselves to the reason we elect people in the first place. And one of the issues with this campaign, I think, is that although the question kept being framed as, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? You could tell by exit polls and the outcome of the election that that really wasn't the question at all. There were lots of social issues. There were lots of people out there saying, look at me, you serve me. How are you serving me? I don't know that our elected officials are ready to have that kind of commitment or recommitment.
Well, I think the biggest problem is, and I think on both sides, is the potential retribution. I do agree with Mark on the fact that there's certain hot button issues, and if you touch those hot button issues, there's somebody out there with a super PAC or a super PAC or who knows what that really comes after you in a way that doesn't that limits dialogue and debate and discussion.
I agree, Peter, but how long can elected officials continue to ignore the voice of the people? I mean, you had single women voting for Obama in huge numbers. They typically vote Democrat, so maybe that's not a surprise. But there were issues that were, every time anyone dared mention health issues or issues around women's health in particular, or people were saying, these are the things that are important to me. Yes, the economy is important to me, but these are other things, quality of life is important to me as well. How long can we ignore that discussion?
What we have to recognize is take a step back, that it's time for really a grown-up conversation. We all want the same things. The Republican Party and the Democrat Party. We want opportunity for people. We want good paying jobs so people can support families. We want education. We want great education available to everyone who wants one. We want safe communities. We want opportunity for people to realize what their dreams are.
Sure.
What we spend all of our time arguing about is how best to do that.
Right.
And there are countries in the world that are fighting over what type of government to even have. We have had some consensus that democracy works, and this is what we do. It's a great country. But we're spending our time debating about how to move ourselves forward. So let's, I think we need to take a step back and realize we all want the same thing, too. We're just talking about how we get there.
And debate is good. I mean, there are people dying for the right to argue. I heard someone say that this morning. I thought that was fabulous. People are dying for the right to argue. So the debate is a wonderful thing. But just like any good manager, our elected officials have to use that debate to get us to the end game, And that's the only sports analogy I'll use this segment. Hold that thought, because I really don't know what I'm talking about. So hold that thought. We got to go away for a second. We'll be right back. Please join us.